Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Thought Podcast.
Yeah, it's January 21st, 2025,
It is.
and Donald Trump is officially back in the White House
He is back.
for his second term.
Second term.
We are going to be sifting through
Yeah.
a mountain of news and analysis today.
We're going to bring you the most important
The most important.
and intriguing bits from his
Action-packed.
action-packed first full day.
You know what's striking right off the bat is just
It's the volume.
the sheer volume of activity.
It's like he hit the ground running and hasn't
And hasn't stopped.
stopped.
He came out strong. You remember just a couple days ago,
His inaugural address.
on January 18th, he delivered that inaugural address.
Yeah.
Declaring a new golden age for America.
Golden age for America.
Right. And he wasted no time putting his money where his mouth is.
Over 200 executive orders signed on day one.
200, that's not just signing off on paperwork. That's a policy. That's a whole policy blitz.
Blitz, it covers everything.
From immigration
Border security.
and border security to a major overhaul of energy policy.
Cost of living.
Cost of living initiatives, and even some
Hot button issues.
really hot-button issues like ending
Yeah.
diversity, equity, and inclusion programs,
Yeah.
those DEI initiatives.
Those DEI initiatives?
He even pulled the U.S. out of the World Health Organization again.
That WHO withdrawal definitely raised some eyebrows,
Yeah,
especially considering everything that's happening globally
right.
with health and pandemics.
Yeah.
Pretty big statement.
It is. And speaking of big statements,
Yeah.
he also unveiled this massive AI infrastructure project
Called Stargate.
called Stargate.
Stargate.
This is where things get really interesting.
Interesting.
Stargate is a collaboration with some major players.
Okay.
SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle.
Big names.
And it aims to build these huge data centers across the U.S.
Data centers.
to basically turbocharge AI development.
Turbocharger.
Trump called it the largest AI infrastructure project in history, with a potential investment reaching $500 billion.
$500 billion? That's an
Yeah.
insane amount of money.
It's a lot of money.
So is this basically Trump saying that AI is the future of the American economy?
It certainly looks that way.
Yeah.
This project could have massive implications
Massive.
for technological advancement and economic growth.
Advancement and growth.
But it also raises questions about the ethical side of AI.
The ethical side.
Job displacement and all that.
Yeah, all that.
We'll have to see how it all plays out.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
There is.
But amidst all this future-focused tech stuff,
Right.
Trump also made a move that throws us right back to the past,
Yeah.
pardoning around 1,500 people involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
The January 6th riot.
He even commuted the sentences of some of the leaders from extremist groups,
Right.
like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys.
The Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys.
That pardon decision sparked some major backlash,
It did. Major backlash.
even from some Republicans.
Even from some Republicans.
Some senators publicly disagreed with the move,
They did.
calling it un-American
Un-American.
and questioning its impact on the rule of law.
Yeah, it's definitely a controversial decision.
The controversial decision for sure.
It seems like every time we take a step forward,
We get pulled right back.
something pulls us right back into these deep political divisions.
The political divisions.
See, pardon just throws more fuel on that fire.
More fuel on the fire.
It's a bold move. Maybe a play for reconciliation with his base.
With his base.
But at what cost?
Like at what cost?
It definitely makes you wonder how this is all going to play out over the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's hard to predict anything with certainty at this point.
It is hard to predict.
What do you think?
What do you think, listener?
Does this feel like a fresh start, or are we just hitting rewind on 2016?
That's the question we're all wrestling with right now.
Right.
Now, beyond the domestic scene, Trump's return to the White House also triggered a wave of international reactions.
World leaders definitely had something to say about all of this.
They did?
Netanyahu, for example, sees it as a chance to strengthen the U.S.-Israel alliance.
Okay.
And Putin expressed interest in peace talks regarding Ukraine,
Regarding Ukraine.
which is at least a good sign.
Those are both interesting developments,
Yeah.
particularly Putin's overture.
Putin's overture.
It remains to be seen how sincere those peace talks might be,
Right.
but it's a flicker of hope in a very dark situation.
It is a flicker of hope.
But then there's that comment about the Panama Canal.
That comment about the Panama Canal.
Trump casually mentioning taking back the Panama Canal definitely raised eyebrows.
It was a bit of a head-scratcher.
It was.
I mean, the U.S. handed over control of the canal to Panama back in 1999.
Yeah, back in 99.
So this offhand comment, whether serious or not,
Right.
prompted a quick and sharp rebuttal from Panama's president.
It did.
It just goes to show you that Trump's second term
Yeah.
could be a minefield of diplomatic tensions and potential misunderstandings.
A minefield.
Definitely seems like we're in for another wild ride.
It does.
But before we jump ahead, let's dig a little deeper into some of the more intriguing details from that first day back.
Let's do it.
There's John Bolton losing his Secret Service detail.
Okay.
Eric Trump making bold predictions about the economy. And even a little anecdote about Barron Trump shaking hands with Biden and Harris at the inauguration.
Let's start with John Bolton, shall we?
Okay, John Bolton.
The fact that Trump revoked his Secret Service detail is pretty telling.
It is telling.
It's not exactly a secret that Bolton,
Right.
Trump's former national security advisor,
Right.
has been pretty critical of him since leaving the administration.
He has.
Trump even called him a very dumb person.
During a press conference.
During a press conference.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting was his explanation for why he revoked the detail.
Okay.
He said Bolton had enough time with protection,
Enough time.
but then added this little tidbit
Okay.
that he used to use Bolton strategically during his first term.
He used to use him. Oh, yeah, that's right. He said people would see Bolton standing behind him in meetings and think, oh, no, he's about to attack someone
Right?
because of Bolton's reputation as a warmonger.
He was a warmonger.
Classic Trump.
It's a very tactical approach to personnel management,
Tactical.
to say the least.
To say the least.
But it also gives you a glimpse into how Trump might approach staffing his administration this time around.
Speaking of Trump's inner circle, his son, Eric Trump, seemed pretty optimistic about the economic outlook.
Optimistic.
He posted on X, predicting transformational wealth in the next 4 years
Transformational wealth.
and urging people to invest in the U.S.
Well, Eric definitely has a vested interest in painting a rosy picture of the economy.
True, but his statement does seem to echo a sentiment we're hearing from some investors.
Okay.
This belief that Trump's policies, especially his focus on deregulation and tax cuts, will lead to major economic growth.
That was certainly a key part of his first-term strategy.
It was
And it seems to be carrying over into his second.
carrying over.
The question is, will it be enough to address some of the deeper structural issues in the economy?
Yeah.
Like income inequality and those lost manufacturing jobs? Only time will tell.
Only time will tell. It's a mixed bag, and it's still so early.
Very early.
But hey, amidst all the political drama and economic forecasting,
Right.
there was also this kind of heartwarming moment involving Barron Trump.
Berntram,
He's a freshman at NYU now.
freshman at NYU.
And apparently he shook hands with both former President Biden and Vice President Harris at the inauguration.
It's a small gesture.
It was a small gesture.
But it sparked a lot of positive comments online.
Online.
People called it a class act and praised him for rising above the political fray.
I think people were just happy to see a little bit of civility and respect.
Yeah.
Especially after such a divisive election.
Divisive.
It was a reminder that even in the midst of all this political chaos,
Yeah.
there are still moments of human connection.
And that's something we should all hold on to, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we also have to acknowledge the very real tensions and disagreements
The tension.
they're playing out right now.
They are.
And one of the biggest flashpoints, as we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
is Trump's decision to pardon those involved in the January 6th Capitol riot.
That decision didn't just spark outrage from the public.
The public.
It also drew criticism from within his own party.
Within his own party.
Republican senators like Lisa Murkowski, Tom Tillis, and Susan Collins all voiced their disagreement,
Okay.
and some even refused to defend the move.
So even within the Republican Party, there's dissent over this.
There is.
It seems like these pardons could create some serious friction and make it harder for Trump to work with Congress.
It definitely highlights the potential for conflict even within the Republican ranks.
Within the Republican ranks.
It also raises questions about the long-term consequences for accountability and the rule of law.
Accountability and the rule of law.
And this is just day one, remember?
This is just day one.
And speaking of potential conflicts, the confirmation hearings for some of Trump's cabinet picks also got pretty heated.
They did get heated.
Doug Collins, the nominee for Veterans Affairs Secretary,
Doug Collins.
faced tough questions about using VA funds for migrant health care.
For migrant health care.
And Elise Stefanik,
Elise Stefanik,
who's been nominated to be the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations,
ambassador to the UN.
got grilled about her views on the UN, especially her stance on Israel and using U.S. taxpayer dollars within the organization.
It seems like these nominees are already facing some serious scrutiny,
Scrutin.
even before they've officially taken office.
That's the reality of a Trump presidency.
The reality.
Everything becomes a battleground, even routine processes like cabinet confirmations.
And speaking of battlegrounds, Trump also reignited a fight over the name of a mountain of all things.
A mountain?
He reversed a decision made during the Obama administration and renamed Mount Denali back to Mount McKinley.
This move, seemingly symbolic, sparked opposition even from Alaska's own Republican senators.
Alaska's own Republican senators?
They expressed their preference for keeping the name Denali.
Keeping the name Denali.
Arguing that it's rooted in the local Athabascan culture.
Local Athabascan culture?
That has been widely accepted for years.
For years. It's amazing how a mountain's name can become such a political football.
It speaks to the complexities of identity politics and cultural sensitivity.
Identity politics and cultural sensitivity.
Especially in a nation as diverse as the United States.
As the United States.
It also underscores the importance of respecting indigenous traditions.
Indigenous tradition.
And acknowledging the wrongs of the past.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of reversing Obama-era policies, Trump also signed an executive order on immigration.
Immigration?
That's sure to stir up controversy.
Controversy.
He reversed a policy that restricted immigration enforcement in certain protected areas.
This move was praised by ICE agents.
ICE agents.
Who felt it would help them enforce immigration laws more effectively.
A lot more effective.
But it's already facing legal challenges from civil rights groups.
Civil rights groups.
They argue that it could lead to racial profiling and the targeting of vulnerable communities.
Vulnerable communities.
It's another example of how Trump is using executive power to quickly push through changes, even in areas where there's strong opposition.
Strong opposition.
And that's a trend we're likely to see more of.
More of.
The ACLU has already filed a lawsuit challenging his order to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants.
That's a huge issue with far-reaching implications.
It is.
And it's all happening on day one.
Day one.
It seems like the pattern is already set.
What is it?
Swift action, bold moves, and immediate pushback.
Buckle up because it looks like it's going to be a bumpy ride.
A bumpy ride.
It's fascinating how this first day back is already shaping up to be a microcosm of what we might expect over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Bold actions, immediate reactions, and this constant push and pull between different factions.
Mm-hmm. Like, everyone is on high alert, waiting to see what he'll do next.
Yeah, on that note.
On that note.
There were a couple more things from yesterday.
Okay.
I think are worth exploring.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Where do you want to start?
One thing that really caught my attention was the complete silence from the former presidents.
Oh!
Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden were all at the inauguration.
They were.
But afterward, not a peep.
Not a peep.
No statements, no congratulations, no well wishes.
It's definitely a break from tradition.
It is.
Usually there's at least a symbolic gesture of support for the incoming president.
Right.
Regardless of party affiliation.
But this time, nothing.
Nothing.
You have to wonder what that says about the current state of American politics.
Yeah.
It's like they're all just speechless.
It speaks to the deep divisions in the sense that we're in uncharted territory.
Uncharted.
These former presidents, despite their differences, have always tried to maintain a certain decorum during these transitions. Their silence this time is deafening.
It definitely adds to the feeling that we're witnessing something truly unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
And speaking of unprecedented, remember that big infrastructure announcement the White House was teasing?
Oh, yeah. They created so much hype around it.
They did.
The new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, really played that one up.
Played it up.
They were dropping hints all day about some major initiative.
Major initiative.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be Stargate.
Stargate, that massive AI infrastructure project we talked about earlier.
Honestly, I think the way they announced it was almost as interesting as the project itself.
I agree.
Yeah.
It shows a certain savvy for media manipulation.
Savvy.
They knew how to generate buzz and control the narrative.
Buzz and control.
It makes you wonder what other tricks do they have up their sleeves.
Okay, let's step back for a moment and think about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
What does all of this tell us about what we can expect from the next 4 years?
From the next 4 years.
What are the key takeaways from this first day?
Well, for one thing, it's pretty clear that Trump is going to govern the same way he did in his first term.
Okay.
Boldly, decisively, and often with little regard for conventional norms.
Yeah.
He's not afraid of controversy, and he's willing to use executive power to push through his agenda.
He's definitely not shying away from any of the policies that divided people before.
Right.
Like pulling out of the WHO or doubling down on border security.
Exactly. And while he's clearly prioritizing economic revitalization.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen how his policies will impact other critical areas like social and environmental issues.
Yeah.
There are a lot of unanswered questions.
A lot of unanswered questions. It feels like a continuation of his first term.
It does.
But maybe with even more intensity and urgency.
Don't forget, the world has changed a lot since his first presidency.
It has.
The war in Ukraine, the rise of China, the lingering effects of the pandemic. These are all major challenges that will shape his second term.
And then there's the political landscape here at home. The country is still deeply divided.
Deeply divided.
Struggling with fundamental questions about its identity, its values, and its future.
And Trump, whether by design or not, has become a symbol of those divisions.
A symbol.
He's a lightning rod for both intense loyalty and fierce opposition.
So if this first day is any indication, we could expect more turbulence, more controversy, and more unpredictable twists and turns.
More twists and turns. It's going to be a fascinating and potentially very volatile 4 years.
Before we move on, I want to touch on a few other things that happened yesterday.
Okay.
Trump announced plans to visit areas affected by Hurricane Helene in North Carolina and the wildfire-stricken regions of California.
Those visits, especially to California, which leans heavily Democratic, will be interesting to watch.
It will.
It'll give us insight into how he approaches disaster relief and how he interacts with states governed by the opposing party.
By the opposing party, he also floated the idea of slapping a 10% tariff on China unless they do something to stop the flow of fentanyl into North America.
That's a bold move that could have huge economic repercussions and further escalate tensions between the two superpowers.
It's classic Trump using economic leverage to try and force other countries to bend to his will.
To bend to his will.
And lastly, there was this rather awkward moment during the prayer service at the National Cathedral.
Oh, yes, the one where President Trump and Vice President Vance seemed visibly annoyed during the bishop's sermon.
Bishop Marian Edgar Bede's sermon touched on some progressive themes, like LGBTQ plus rights and immigration.
Right.
And you could tell that it wasn't sitting well with them.
It was a brief but telling moment that highlighted the stark ideological differences between Trump and certain segments of the religious community.
It was a reminder that even in seemingly non-political settings, those cultural and political divides are always simmering just below the surface.
Simmering just below the surface.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground dissecting the highs and lows, the controversies, and the curiosities of Trump's first day back in the White House.
It was a day packed with action, signaling a second term that's likely to be anything but ordinary.
But we're not done yet. There are still a few more threads to pull on.
Okay.
Including some interesting developments regarding potential conflicts of interest and a closer look at the economic implications of his executive orders.
We'll also delve into some of the early analysis and predictions from political commentators and experts trying to make sense of what this all means for the future of America.
So join us for the final part of this deep thought session as we continue to explore this pivotal day in American history. Welcome back to the Deep Thought Podcast. We're wrapping up our deep thought session on Trump's first full day back in the White House.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this last part is a doozy.
It certainly is. We've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
But there are a few more key developments from January 21st that we need to analyze to get a full picture of what we might expect from Trump 2.0.
Because the day didn't end with those awkward moments at the National Cathedral.
No, it didn't.
There was still a lot more to come.
A lot more to come.
Including some eyebrow-raising moves that could have major legal and ethical implications.
One of the biggest stories that emerged later in the day was about potential conflicts of interest involving Trump's businesses.
Conflicts of interest.
Remember, he never fully divested from his companies when he was president the first time around.
And it seems like that's going to be an issue again.
He does.
Several watchdog groups are already raising concerns about foreign governments and special interest groups potentially trying to curry favor with the administration. By doing business with Trump's companies.
It's a valid concern. There's a real risk of the lines between personal business interests and official government actions becoming blurred. It's something that will likely be under scrutiny throughout his entire presidency.
Since speaking of scrutiny, let's talk about those executive orders on the economy.
Okay, the executive orders.
We touched on this earlier, but now that we've had some time to digest them, what are the potential long-term implications?
Yeah. Well, the biggest takeaway is that Trump is doubling down on his America First economic agenda.
America First.
Tax cuts, deregulation, protectionist trade policies. It's all very familiar territory.
But is it the right approach for the current economic climate? I mean, we're facing some pretty serious challenges like inflation, supply chain disruptions, and rising inequality.
Those are all valid concerns. The big question is whether these policies will actually deliver the promised economic growth and job creation, or if they'll just exacerbate existing problems.
Right.
We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but it's definitely something to keep a close eye on.
And while we're talking about the economy, we can't forget about Stargate, that ambitious AI infrastructure project that Trump unveiled.
Stargate.
It's clearly a centerpiece of his vision for the future.
It's a bold move, and it has the potential to reshape the technological landscape. But it also raises a lot of questions about the ethical implications of AI.
Right.
Like its impact on jobs and the potential for misuse.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the geopolitical implications. China is already investing heavily in AI. So this could be seen as a way for the U.S. to maintain its technological edge.
It's definitely a move that will reverberate on the world stage. And speaking of the world stage, we also need to talk about those international reactions to Trump's return.
International reactions.
We touched on some of the early responses, but the analysis is starting to pour in.
Right. Everyone from world leaders to political commentators are trying to make sense of what this all means for global stability and America's role in the world.
The general consensus seems to be a mix of caution and concern. Allies are wary, adversaries are emboldened, and everyone is waiting to see what Trump's foreign policy will actually look like in practice.
It's a pretty uncertain time, to say the least. It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next.
And that's the thing about a Trump presidency. It's inherently unpredictable. He's a disruptor, a rule breaker, and he thrives on chaos that makes him both fascinating and terrifying to watch.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep thought session, I'm left with one overwhelming feeling buckled up, because it's going to be a wild ride.
I couldn't agree more. Trump's second term is already off to a dramatic start, and it's only going to get more intense from here. The stakes are incredibly high, and the consequences will be felt around the world.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep thought journey through Trump's first full day back in the White House. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully this has given you some food for thought and a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
And remember, this is just the beginning. We'll be continuing to analyze and dissect the key events of Trump's presidency, so be sure to stay tuned for future episodes of the Deep Thought Podcast.
That's right. And before we go, a few reminders. Please like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our other podcasts covering a wide range of fascinating topics.
And for those who want to explore further, you'll find links related to everything we've discussed in the description below.
And finally, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Trump's return to the White House? What are your hopes and fears for the next 4 years? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, keep thinking deeply.
See you next time.